Okay, let's begin. Come lay down on your back. Make yourself as comfortable there as you can while still being able to feel the support of the floor. You might want to take off your glasses, or if there's anything else that is distracting, a belt or a jewelry or something like that. And give yourself a little time to start to sink your attention down into the floor. And what do you notice? What are you noticing? Where does your mind go? Notice if anything bubbles to the surface as you're resting. Do you find that you allow yourself to notice things that you might otherwise be pushing off to the sidelines? And notice how big you feel. Notice the kind of contact that you're making with the floor. And that even though that's happening at your feet and at your legs and at your arms and your head, all throughout your torso, do you have a feeling of your expansive self? Do you have a feeling of your height and your width? Or do you find that your image of yourself is a little bit localized? There's a part of you that seems to be the epicenter of yourself. And what do you notice about the way that you're breathing right now? Is that a localized experience? Is that more of a full body experience? Is there anything familiar about the actual sensation of your breathing? And then bring your attention to your inhales and see if anything changes in the distribution of your weight on the floor as you start to exaggerate your inhalation. Where is there a part of you that moves away from the floor? Where is there a part of you that moves toward the floor? And as you're paying attention like this, what's it like for you to just be aware? To just observe without trying to do a thing or accomplish a thing or change a thing? Now deepen your attention into your breathing and follow the journey that your air takes in your nostrils and to the back of your throat. And then from the back of your throat where you would swallow down to the base of your throat. And see if you can imagine where your lungs begin to the right and the left of the base of your throat. And listen for a sense of expansion that starts there underneath your collarbones. And then how does it move from there? Notice where your breath feels like it's under your collarbones, where your breath feels like it's under your arms, where your breath feels like it's in your back. See if you can start to imagine the shape of your lungs. Now your lungs take up pretty much the entirety of your upper rib cage. but they're toward the back, and hugged between them is your heart. And then really literally nestled up underneath them, you have your liver. And so when you're expanding your lungs, there's literally a pressure that increases onto your adjacent organs. There's a change that happens. There's an interaction. And then, of course, the movement that you start to notice in your abdomen isn't because your lungs are down in your belly, but because there's a visceral change. Your organs are changing their position in your abdomen, in your abdominal cavity. There's also a pressure change between your chest cavity and your abdominal cavity. So see what if that you can sense can be in your sensory experience. Can you imagine a compression of your liver, a compression of your digestive system? Can you imagine a compression of your heart? Right up in the middle of your chest. And then what do you notice about the adjacent parts of you? So what do you notice about your neck and your shoulders? Is there any kind of effort in that area? And how about your low back, your belly, your pelvic floor? Anything you can sense there, either in service to or in response to your breathing? And so your lungs are contained in this continuous sac, which in a way makes them almost like a uniformed thing. And yet you might get a sense that one of your lungs moves more differently than the other one. Can you imagine your lungs with the quality like Jello? And then just pay attention to your right lung. And notice the feeling of your nostrils. And then as you lightly swallow, feel the back of your throat. And then you might even swallow a few times, and you might get a sense that there's this fascial connection that goes from the back of your throat down your esophagus to where your tubes branch off into your lungs, into your heart, into your stomach. And then just keep your attention on your right lung. And see if you can get this sense of your right lung not only being encased by this sac, but also being somewhat glued to the inner lining of your rib cage. And see if your lung is moving your ribs or if your ribs are moving your lung. What happens in that glued relationship? Underneath your clavicle, underneath your collarbone, underneath your arm, along your waist, and moving around toward the floating rib area, the upper curvature of your low back. How up down does your lung move from up at your collarbone to down toward the curvature of your low back? Listen for that quality of movement. And then notice how that movement is different from a forward back movement, where your lung is connecting to the lining in the front of your chest and to the back of your chest. And of course, some combination of forward and back and up and down results in a side to side. Can you detect the outward movement to the right, to the left of your right lung? Then leave your right lung and pay attention to your left lung. And what do you notice? What's different about the left lung? Now continue to have your legs long, or bend your knees and stand your feet if you prefer. And notice already more or less the kind of rhythm that you've created for your breathing, more or less the count that you've created for your inhale. And whatever you've created for your inhale, see if you can turn that into a 4-part breathing, so that after you finish inhaling, you retain your breath for the same amount of time. And then you exhale for the same amount of time. And then you keep your breath out for the same amount of time. And it could be interesting to start keeping your rhythm with a little tapping of your finger on yourself or on the floor. And as you're following the movement of your right and left lung to your personal rhythm, pay attention to the different sensation in each part of the breathing. As though they could be recognizable by sensation alone. How well do you know those 4 sensations? Do you see them as 4 separate sensations? And then from there, can you start to get a sense of if one of those sensations is particularly familiar? And it's quite likely that you have a tendency to live in some part of those 4 parts of your breath cycle. Which part of the breath cycle seems like it can go on for the longest? Whereas which part of the breath cycle seems like you really got to make sure you maintain that count? It takes a little bit more effort or concentration. Now keep going as you are, but exaggerate the movement of your chest when you're breathing in and when you're retaining that breath. And then also exaggerate the movement of your chest, the closing of your chest when you're exhaling and you're keeping the breath out. And just play with that for a few rounds, the definitive feeling of a change in your rib basket, your rib cage, both expansive and contracting. And then you can work on your own timing. What I want you to play with is I want you to see if you can find that expansive chest and maintain the expansive chest while going through all 4 parts of the breath cycle. So whether you're breathing in, holding the breath, exhaling, or keeping the breath out, you're going to see if you can maintain that expanded inhale chest feeling. And of course, rest whenever you need to, but play with it a bit. Your chest stays wide, it stays high, it stays expanded through all parts of the journey. And when you're keeping your chest expanded like that and trying to maintain your 4-part breath rhythm, notice your abdomen. And then once you've completed several rounds like that, then just give yourself a rest. Is there anything changing about your resting breathing? And then again, follow your own timing, right? You can always stay with whatever is interesting you as long as you like. But the next variation will be, again, with the legs long or feet standing, whatever's more comfortable for you. But you're going to start to play with expanding your abdomen and keeping your abdomen expanded throughout the course of the four parts of the breath. So as you breathe in, you'll expand your belly right down to your pubic bone. And then you'll try to keep that expansion as you hold the breath. And as you exhale, and as you keep the breath out. And then as you start inhaling again. And then again, it could be useful to maintain some sort of tapping. It might be interesting to feel the feedback of the movement of your finger or whatever part of yourself you're tapping as part of your counting experience, so that you're not counting so much as listening to your own rhythm. And what's interesting about this configuration, abdomen protruding, what does that ask of your chest when your abdomen is protruding? And how does it feel to breathe in that posture? And now keep your legs long and bring your arms up alongside your head. But again, if it's uncomfortable for your back, just have your feet standing. And have your arms as straight as they can be with any kind of, without any strain, without holding them straight. And move into your 4-part breathing again. Find your rhythm. Maybe tap out with your fingernail. And see, with your arms and your shoulders in this alignment, what changes about the movement of your lungs? What happens about the part of your lungs below your collarbones? How much movement do you feel up there? And it can be really interesting to think about the shape of your rib basket, your rib cage, because your ribs at the top are very narrow and they form a ring. And so by definition, a ring only has so much potential for expansion, right? If it's a contained ring. But then of course, as you go down your rib cage, your ribs the diameter gets increased, and then your bottom ribs are not connected, right? So the potential for movement is obviously much greater lower down your ribs than at the top of your ribs. And yet your lungs are up there underneath your collarbones as much as they are there in your back ribs. So what do you make of the potential to be breathing with more of your lungs? To be allowing for more of a spaciousness, more potential of the movement of your lungs. And then come over to this position on your front side. So your forehead will be on the floor and your arms are going to be next to your head. And if you want, you could put a blanket under your forehead. You can put your hands under your forehead. And otherwise, have your forehead against the floor, which might be a bit of an unusual configuration for your neck and shoulders, but see what you can do. Have your legs quite wide apart. And you might consider for yourself what shape you have in your neck when your forehead's on the floor versus if your forehead is elevated. What might change in the position of your top ribs, those rings, the top rings of your ribs, if your forehead is on the floor or if your forehead's lifted? See if you can imagine that. And then bring your attention to the floor and return to your 4-part breathing. And listen to what changes in the pressure that the front of you is making with the floor. I'd say have your forehead on your hands as opposed to on a roll, because then your neck will be a little bit more neutral as opposed to shortened. If it's uncomfortable to have your forehead on the floor. And now see if you can zero in on the particular parts of the front of you that increase and decrease their pressure with the floor. And also notice if there's a difference from left to right. Does the pressure stay the same between the inhale and the retention? Does it stay the same between the exhale and the retention out? What do you notice about the excursion of your air through your nostrils into the back of your throat, down to the bottom of your throat, from underneath your collarbones, underneath your armpits, and around to the middle of your back? How many dimensions are there to your breathing? Are you maintaining an even rhythm of your four parts? Or do you find that you shorten or elongate a certain part? And what do you recognize when you're in this position, when you feel the four parts of your breathing? Is there a certain place of a deeper recognition, something that's more familiar in the feeling? And then roll onto your back again, take a little rest, and notice yourself. Notice how you breathe when you're resting on your back. Notice the excursion from your nostrils down, the gluing of the outer border of your lungs to the inner border of your rib cage. And then roll over and sit cross-legged for a few moments. Of course, you can sit on a cushion if it makes it more comfortable. And then bring your arms into a big hug of yourself. And maybe you can be holding on to your own shoulders. And then bow your head and let the weight of your own arms start to bring your shoulders forward so your back is rounded, your head is hanging. And you'll notice that the front of you is shorter than the back of you. The back of you is long, your head is hanging. You can think of it as reverence, you can think of it as I don't know, I was just thinking of it as a hug. It's an internal hug and also some sort of cocooning, quiet place to go. And then once you're comfortable in that configuration, then bring your attention back to your four-part breathing and follow the excursion through your nose to the top of your throat, to the bottom of your throat, and below your collarbones. Where is below your collarbones in the back? And then, of course, because you have a compression in the front, you have a limited space in the front. What comes of the excursion of your breath in the back? Let your head bow as much as you can. Bow forward, rounding forward, as though you had fallen asleep and soon your head would come to rest right on your own feet. And you might feel that the tissues of your back change their resting position. See that your abdomen is soft. What does it feel like in your abdomen when you're breathing into your back like this? And then come up, rest your arms for a moment. Maybe take a few breaths upright. And then when you're ready, change the arm that's on top in your hug. And some of you might notice that it can be quite a different experience. So now you're hugging yourself again. Let the weight of your arms drag your head forward and down so your back is rounded as much as you can be with any kind of strain or pain, as though you were curling yourself up into a little ball, deep into your hug. And just make sure you're not pressing your teeth together. You're not holding yourself up with your hip flexors or your back. And so it's really a slump. You're slumped as much forward as you can be without over pulling. And then watch how your breathing moves in this coordination. Feel the weight of your arms pulling you down. What stops your arms from coming right onto your lap? Where do you resist that? Where is your back able to bend? Or can you be more supple with your spine? What's your upper back doing? Are you keeping your upper back upright, but your head is bent forward? Can you let your head and your upper back be connected? And so you were bowing, a reverent bow. And then just sit up for a moment. And then come lay down on your back. And roll over onto your front side again. Put your forehead on the floor if that works for you, otherwise on your hands. Have your legs wide apart. And you adjust your arms however you need. But you're going to see if you can lift your head and your face to look forward, though you can still keep your eyes closed. And can you stay in that position and feel your 4-part breathing? So start to bring your air in and listen to what shifts in your pressure against the floor. Feel your count. Maintain for the same count. Maybe it's different now than it was earlier. Exhale for that count. Keep the exhale out. And now don't force yourself, don't strain, right? If you can keep your head lifted for the whole 4 parts, then do. If that's a bit much, then you do it incrementally. You can adjust your arms however you need so that it's easier to have your head lifted. If you want your elbows more under your armpits, you could do that instead. And you look forward with your eyes, even though your eyes are closed. And so you have your back in a very particular configuration. And you listen to the potential of your breathing in this particular posture. Under your collarbones, under your armpits, around to your back. And where does your rib cage lift? Where does it expand? Don't wait until you're straining to take a break, right? Don't push yourself. And then do rest your head if you're not already. And now bend your knees so your feet are looking at the ceiling, and then bring the bottoms of your feet to touch. So again, you might need to widen your legs more so your feet can be resting on each other. And then again, when you're ready, maintaining your 4-part breathing, you're going to see what it feels like to lift your head, keep your eyes forward, and feel. How do you use the front of you? How do you use the back of you? What's it like to breathe? 4 parts, 4 definitive parts. Reduce the effort where you can. And use this shape as a learning tool, not as a challenge. So you rest when you need to. And if you find something is interesting in those 4 parts, then maybe you come back to it and you explore again. Maybe you continue to rest. Take another few moments on your own to explore. Can you tell where you live? Do you live in the inhale, the retention? Do you live in an exhale, retention? Where's that familiar organization of your musculature when your back's an extension like this? How long are your lungs? Then rest your legs down, rest your head comfortably. Roll over onto your back. And one more time, bring your arms up long alongside your head, as straight as possible without holding your arms rigidly straight. And follow the excursion of your air in through your nostrils. Listen for the sense of the top of your lungs on either side of the brachii, just underneath that notch at the base of your throat. Wrapping around underneath your armpits. And moving back down your back ribs to your floating ribs. And what kind of impression of your diaphragm can you get as you move into your 4 parts of breathing? So you have time to sense in each part. And can you listen for this sense that as your inhale is coming and your diaphragm is widening and it's pulling the bottom portion of your lungs down, being traction from where your lungs are connected at the top. And then you maintain that tension, that load as you're holding your breath in. And then as you're breathing out, can you feel that your diaphragm resumes its resting place? And then as you're keeping the breath out, you might feel a slight lifting of your diaphragm, moving the rest of the air out, keeping the air out. And again, when you're breathing in, this stretching open, the lowering of your diaphragm, widening of your diaphragm, pulling on the bottom of your lungs, lengthening your lungs from your collarbones, maintaining in your retention. And then when you're exhaling, feeling the return of your diaphragm up in the direction of your head, and then maybe a slight lifting of your diaphragm. And for the last few rounds of 4-part breathing, it could be interesting to elongate your count. It could be useful to again start tapping out with one of your fingers or your hand, your foot. And then bring your arms down by your sides. And feel how your natural, comfortable resting breathing is. Notice the way that you see your lungs. And then if you can, continue to give yourself time to rest and see if before you re-engage with your world, if you can take a little bit of time to recognize yourself in standing and walking around after having changed your awareness like this, and enjoy your integration time.